After quitting my factory job and having trouble finding a job worth the money, I came across a job advertisement in the local town paper. Hiring, night shift security guard, no experience needed. Call Maurice at phone number listed. I called the number and was greeted by an elderly man. He informed me to come in the next day and he would show me around and fill me in. So I'm hired? Yeah, kid. I went in the next day and showed up for the interview about 15 minutes early. If you aren't early or late, I was informed to go to a side door and where the security office was, so I wouldn't be interfering with those at the funeral home who were mourning a loved one. A short man with wrinkles and a nice and tight white haircut wearing a security uniform was smiling at me. He had a white caterpillar above his lips stained slightly with black coffee he was sipping on. You must be Conway. Are you named after the singer? Probably. My mom sure loves old country music. Don't you call that old? He let out a chuckle and reached his frail hands out to me. I shook his and didn't expect it to be as firm as it was. They put me over the hiring process and you were the first to put in, so I believe in giving chances. I sure appreciate it. Yes, sir. You'll be working a Monday through Friday, from 11 to 7 p.m. He went through the pay, which was exactly what I was making in the factory. He also explained that a weekend crew guys were only 2 of them, but they worked 12-hour shifts and filled me in their names, Jacob and Robert. The evening guys, Jackson. You may have to fill in for them. He also told me I could have day shift when he's dead and cold. He don't want to retire until he has to. I've had this job since I was about your age. It's a good job. He filled me in on how to watch the cameras, answer a phone call, though it wouldn't happen much at night unless it was a prank call. He also told me what times I should patrol the area. The biggest rule is to respect the dead. I wasn't sure what he meant by it. Our last guy we had was an old coot that kicked the bucket. May he rest in peace. We shook hands on my way out and he offered one more piece of advice. I understand at nighttime it may be a little scary. I worked a few shifts. You're the only person that will be here, and I get that. You may get the heebie-jeebies, but respect the dead and don't let anybody in under any circumstance. I got my keys, and so do the other guys. I felt excited coming in on my first night. Jackson let me in and handed me my new badge. I offered him a donut as I settled in the office, and he left. I checked the camera screen while sipping on my coffee. I didn't have any areas I was supposed to check for another hour, and nothing was going on. I brought my iPad and put Seinfeld on to kill time. Maurice said there wouldn't be any issues with killing time, as long as it didn't interfere with the job. 2 hours have gone by, and I walked the halls with my issued flashlight, and then I heard a knock at the front door. I scooted back to the office and seen that it was Maurice knocking. The knocking became a banging. He was wearing street clothes. Conway, open up, kid. I need in. I walk over to the door and speak through it. What can I do for you? Listen, I need in. I forgot my medication. What medication? That doesn't matter, but I need in. Don't you have your keys on you? Keys? No, I forgot them. I remembered that he had his office key attached to his key ring that also held ones for his home, truck, and other things. How did you get here? In my vehicle. What color is your car? What? I said, what color is your car? Black. You don't drive a car. You have a red truck. He began banging on the door and his voice became much, much deeper and distorted. Let me in this fucking door so I can get my medication or I'll fire your ass. I turned around and ran back to the office and tried to tune the noise out. He looked up at the camera and had a very wild smile. Smart boy. He turned around and walked off. Hours passed, and it's about time I go walk in the area where the dead bodies are kept in lockers. I knew it was going to smell like cleaning supplies and be cold. I put on my issue jacket. I glanced at the camera down there and froze in place. There were people standing in the area, just standing around and talking. If I would have been thinking, I would have called the cops. But who was also to say that the cops coming were actually law enforcement, and not whatever the hell I just witnessed? I ran down to the area with my flashlight swinging, as if a light were mechanically moving left, right, left, right. I opened the door and seen lockers open and a group of dead people standing and having conversation. One turned to me. "Hello there." That's the last thing I remembered. I woke up shortly after and the dead were standing around me. It was scary but yet heartbreaking. Here stood someone's grandfather, someone who died by suicide, some others, and one that looked butchered badly. What the hell is happening? The grandpa spoke up. "I found a note left on this table, and it explains we're going to be alive for another 10 minutes or so. Then we go back in our lockers." "What?" "Beats me." I looked at the lady that was butchered. Her throat was cut, stab marks through her body that made her sundress stain crimson. What happened to you?" "Someone broke in my home and did this." "Do you know who it was?" "I don't, but I want them to suffer the way I did." She began describing the man having dark and short hair, but he also had a snake tattooed on his arm. He also had a prison neck tattoo that she didn't understand what it was. The others stood around and listening. They began mumbling about their lives and enjoying their last bit of time. 4 a.m. pops up in my watch and they all go back in their locker as if their legs were forcing them to. I considered making a run and leaving. I checked the camera to make sure that no one's at the front door, but it didn't feel worth the risk. I finished the shift. As soon as it became 7 on the dot, Maurice opened up with his keys and patted me on the back. "You sipping from a cup of coffee? Okay, kid, let's talk about all this. I'll keep you guys updated as quickly as I can." I met my girlfriend, Victoria, 7 months ago in a bar. We felt an instant connection and started dating 3 days later. She brought nothing but happiness, the perfect definition of a soulmate. So when I graduated from university, we both agreed to move in together. She's 2 years older than me and was already working, so I moved into her house. However, after moving in, everything went downhill. The first incident happened on the first night of moving in. Victoria works night shift, so she was getting ready to head out. "Babe, I'm off to work now. Just to tell you again, the neighbors next door get a little cranky at night, so just ignore them," she said sweetly. Yeah, I get it," I responded. I gave her a kiss goodbye and she left, leaving me alone in her house. I sat down on the kitchen table and got to work. For context, I work remotely as a character designer for a video game company. It was peaceful for a few hours until the clock hit 2 a.m. The cranky neighbors began screaming profusely. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it sounded like an intense argument. I tried ignoring it for a while, but eventually the sound became unbearable. Banging was heard on the walls, glass shattering on the floor, followed by more screaming and arguing. So much so that it sounded like multiple voices overlapping each other. I tried blasting music in my headphones, but that didn't help. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore, so I called it a night and stopped working. The next day passed by in a flash. I chose not to tell Victoria about the neighbors since it was apparently normal, and I didn't want her to think that it bothered me so much. It was her house, after all. Nighttime came, and I was watching TV in the sofa when the arguments from the neighbors came again. Thumping, glass shattering, furniture being thrown around. You'd think their house is a WWE ring. Jesus Christ, I muttered to myself. Suddenly, I started hearing banging on the door, followed by a blood-curdling scream. What the fuck? I said while pausing the movie I was watching. The neighbor was trying to break into the house. That's it. That was the last straw. I got up and went to the back door where the banging and screaming was being heard. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen table in case the man would break the door. Thank God it was locked. Just in case, I leaned against it, each punch crushing my back. My heart was racing. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. For all I knew, the man could seriously hurt me. It felt like an eternity before what I'm assuming is a man stopped banging the door. Concurrently, the screaming stopped, and it was silent. The fuck? I muttered under my breath. There was no way I was going to live in these conditions. I decided that I was going to confront Victoria about it when she got home. With that in mind, I made sure all the doors were locked, windows shut, and went to bed. A few hours later at 6 a.m., my girlfriend got home and laid down in the bed next to me. She hugged me from behind and gave me a kiss on the nape, waking me up. "How's everything?" she asked softly. "Were the neighbors loud?" I grunted and turned my head to face her, rubbing my eyes. "What?" Victoria giggled. "How did it go with the neighbors?" I found it strange that she asked me that today but not yesterday. Maybe it was me being tired. "The husband tried breaking in," I said. "He banged on the door for at least 2 minutes, screaming. I thought that was the end for me. Seriously, Victoria, I don't think this house is safe for us to live in." "As long as the door is locked, you should be fine." She smiled. Sweetly, I gave Victoria a serious look. "Listen, I can't live with these conditions." I tried to say it as nicely as possible. "I didn't even feel safe in this house last night." "You're telling me this is going to happen every single night?" Victoria looked down, her eyelids drooping down in discomfort. I felt sorry blaming her for something that wasn't her fault, but we obviously needed to do something about it. "I can't fear for my life every night." "I'll call the wife tonight and see if anything can be done." She hugged me tightly. "Okay?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Thank you, baby. I know it's not your fault, but it's impossible to live in fear in my own house every night." On the following evening, Victoria left for her night shift. Once again, I was left alone in her house. She texted me around 15 minutes later, telling me that the problem was solved and that it should be better tonight. I thanked her and laid down on the sofa to wind down. I ended up falling asleep while watching a movie. I woke up a few hours later at 4 a.m. to screaming from the psychotic neighbors once again. Furious, I got out of bed and prepared myself for confrontation. I was ready to finally get to the bottom of this. However, as I walked closer to the front door, something felt off. I noticed the voices and banging a little closer than usual, as if they were in the same house. It was the first time I ever paid attention to where the sound was truly coming from, but it was still unexpected. Subtle but unexpected. Following the traces of sound, the screams didn't take me to the front entrance or to the house next door. They took me to the basement door, the only part of the house I haven't gone into yet. My heart began racing. This has to be my hallucinations. The sounds can't be coming from my girlfriend's basement, right? With my legs trembling, I tried to push the basement door open, but it was locked. It only resulted in even louder screams coming from downstairs. They sounded like a cry for help. "What the fuck is down there?" I muttered. The thought alone sent shivers down my spine. Thankfully or unthankfully, my uncle taught me lockpicking when I was younger in case I was in a dangerous situation where I needed it. Thanks, Uncle Will. So if there's ever been an opportunity to use that skill, it will be now. I took 2 paper clips and started fidgeting them inside of the lock. In just a few minutes, the door unlocked, but it still wouldn't open. I looked around the house for anything I could use until I found a crowbar. Using all my might, I pushed the door open. Looking back, I wish I hadn't. Instantly, I heard loud, blood-curdling screams piercing my ears. Screams that you would only hear in horror movies. Covering my ears, I forced my way downstairs. What I saw was horrific. Dead bodies of dozens of guys were organized in a line on the floor across the basement. Worst of all, every guy there looked to be around my age, many looking like the exes Victoria had talked about in passing. Above them was a jar. Inside, it looked to be their faces with a large glow surrounding them. They were screaming in absolute agonizing pain. From what I saw, it looked to be their souls. The sealed, trapped souls of innocent men facing endless pain in their afterlife. The stench was unbearable. Their bodies were bled out as if everything inside of these men were sucked out to leave only their pure skin. Despite that, their faces were somewhat recognizable, each body neatly placed to keep its original shape. Their names were written in blood in front of each body. Jack, Noah, Michael, etc. Their screams sounded more like loud gasps from up close. The room was so loud I was getting dizzy. The screams only got louder. It sounded loud enough to screech into my brain. My mind went blank, my body shaking at the thought that this was my girlfriend's creation. It got even worse when I got to the end. Another name written in blood with no body behind it, as if it was still being prepared, Dylan. That was my name. I then got a notification on my phone, a message from Victoria. My heart stopped just by reading it. "Hey babe, on my home. Sorry about yesterday. Let's have some fun tonight, winky face.